My name is Mirka. We are broadcasting the sessions of Lead Montessori Community Conversations from Prague, from Montessori Institute Prague in the Czech Republic. And together with me is Sveta, our technical host. There she is. And what we're going to do is we'll welcome our speaker in just a moment. And Lesley Ann will speak about a beautiful elementary program which is done outside. And I personally am really looking forward to the presentation today. And then when she's done, we'll turn off the recording and we'll turn off the streaming, and then we'll just have a conversation. We can talk about our reflections, and we can, if you have questions, you can ask questions, or you can share what you're doing, what your situation is, where you are, just anything that you will feel called to. We turn off the recording and the streaming for that part so that we all feel free to share in a safe community environment. I do welcome you to keep your cameras on, though we are streaming and recording, but we do like to support this feeling of community, and in order to have that, it's nice to see who is here, and it's nice to be able to connect in that way. For the session, please stay muted, and then once we start the conversation, I will kind of watch out who wants to speak. You can either raise your hand, or you can just by unmuting suggest that you're going to say something, and I will call upon you so we can talk with each other. Okay. Did I forget something, Sveta, or do you think we can
I think
start?
It's okay.
Yeah, okay, let me just, I think so. All right. We are doing this, for those of you who are new here today, we are doing these Lead Montessori community conversations to stick together through a complicated time. And it has shown in the past, when we started doing community conversations in March, that it is quite helpful when we are able to see each other every week and to discuss our burdens and just sort of help each other. So that's the purpose of why we are here, to have a respectful, nourishing, and supporting conversation about topics which are of interest and which help us to stick through these complicated times. And hello, Peter. I see you just joined. All right, so I will now invite Lesley and Patrick to speak. Lesley and Patrick, those of you who don't know her, is one of the pillar people in the adolescent work, in the Montessori adolescent work in the world. She has years and years of experience, and I do have a personal connection with her because when my son studied in Sweden at the Montessori adolescent program, she was there and she worked with him. So we know each other, not just colleagues, but also as friends. And I deeply admire Lesley for her work. She has supported numerous adolescent programs around the globe, and she has so much to share. So saying that, Lesley, please take over. Thank you.
Thank you, Mirka. Thank you, Mirka. I'm actually not going to talk about adolescence at all today, because like many of us on this Montessori journey, we often go through the planes, and like many people, I was first of all trained 3 to 6. That was where I began. And what I would like to share with you is something which I think can be quite helpful at this period where we have social distancing and masks and all of the things associated with this pandemic. One of the things is, how do we get the children outside? Because it seems to be, if they can be outside, then they are able to continue their education much more easily. And so I'm just going to share with you very briefly the story of how it happened for me, and what I discovered and what I learned from the children that I worked with. You know, we approached this very much as Montessori is an aid to life. It is not a school. And so we approached very much the outdoor environment as how can it serve a child's development rather than how can it offer an education. I think many people actually are trying to do that. In a way, you know, the relationship with nature and children, it goes back to my own childhood. I mean, I'm aware that I spent a large amount of my childhood exploring freedom, exploring independence, much of it outdoors. I was fortunate to grow up in very rural areas of France and spent a long period of my childhood in Africa. And so I grew up with a great affinity for the natural world, if you like, and things that can be done outdoors. And it's really distressing when we read now of children suffering from nature deficit disorder. I mean, this is prior to the pandemic that we have currently. It's really horrifying that this is what's happening to our children, and I'm sure you're all aware of that. And what can we do about it? I think we have to also be aware this doesn't just affect children, but this affects adults working with children as well. So if I think back long ago to when I first became a Montessori guide 3 to 6, I was in Cambridge in England. In my first very beautiful prepared environment. It was an AMI school I was fortunate to have my first job in. But very close to the school was a lovely area of open land. And I was always intrigued to see how the children were so drawn and attracted to this piece of outdoor land. Even though they loved their children's house, you could see when they left, they would go with the parents and there would be this wonderful, almost like celebration of being out in nature again. And much of me was thinking, how can we work with children outdoors? But of course, being a newly qualified Montessori teacher, I was thinking, but we have this beautiful prepared environment with these beautiful materials. And that, you know, is where we have to work. And then I encountered a Norwegian educator in the course of my work, a man called Anders. And he actually was running in Norway an outdoor kindergarten. And he showed me many pictures about his environment, many practical activities, children doing very interesting things, all very structured. And I began to think there's a possibility here. How can we bring that kind of outdoor environment together with our beautiful Montessori indoor environment? Is it possible? And then I remembered seeing, like we've all seen in the books, the old photographs of Montessori outside, always with lots and lots of children digging, and all the references that she makes throughout her texts to the importance of nature. And so I decided to try to see if I could find a way to bring the two together. So in 1998, I moved with my family to live in Scotland. And there an opportunity arose for me to create a children's house. It was a children's house which eventually grew into an elementary class and went all the way up to 12. And I decided from the beginning that with this children's house, we would also create an outdoor environment, because we had right adjoining the school building, beautiful woodland. And I decided that I needed this outdoor environment to be rooted in the Montessori principles. This had to be a place which was actually going to support the children's holistic development. It had to be a place where their developmental needs could be really, really met. It needed to be much more than just an outdoor play space. It needed to be a beautiful space with real motives for activity, which would actually call the children to work, just in the same way as their indoor environment did. And so this piece of Woodland, when I started to really become familiar with it, I could see actually had all the components that were necessary for a Montessori environment. I was thinking things like, how can we offer the children open-ended time, a place where they can just arrive, they can do their work, they can eat when they're hungry, they can rest when they want to rest, they can choose their activities, and they can end when they choose to end. So time felt very, very important, which meant we couldn't then have, now it's outdoor time, now it's indoor time. There had to be a flexibility there. I was thinking there has to be a freedom to choose the work that they're going to do. There has to be built in a design for independence. How can we do that? There has to be opportunities for them to be alone, or to work with a friend, or to be in a small group. So all the things that we would consider for an indoor environment, you stand in this outdoor environment and you think about how can we do that? And as always, it came into my understanding, this has to start with the adult. There has to be a prepared adult who is able to do this work. And I was very clear, we don't want a forest school type leader who comes with a bag of goodies to entice and entertain and keep the children busy. That wasn't what we wanted to happen. Rather, we wanted somebody who was able to present to the children the potential for possible work, knowing when to step in and support them, but equally knowing when to step back and leave them alone once they're engaged. Not somebody who is going to just abandon them with this false notion of freedom, open space, they can go and do as they please without any kind of presentation to the environment. And it had to be somebody who was aware of the children's developmental needs, somebody who knew how to observe, who was able to just give what was needed, no more, no less. And obviously somebody who was never going to allow fantasy play. We were not in the Woodland to play fantasy. So really it needed to be a Montessori teacher who was going to support the outdoor environment. And then we had to look at practical life. That is the backbone of Montessori. So how do we offer practical life activities in an outdoor environment? We needed to think about, well, why do we do practical life? We need possibilities for children to develop concentration, for them to be able to complete cycles of activity, for them to be able to develop their fine motor control and their gross muscle, opportunities to refine their movement, their coordination, and their balance. And it felt like there was no purpose in just merely taking Montessori materials into the woodland in the way that you would take them into the garden, because many children do work outdoors with their Montessori materials in their children's house gardens. but we felt that the Woodland actually had its own developmental materials, which the children could access once they were introduced. And I started to think about children all around the world, and I traveled very much in my own childhood, and actually had traveled also in my adulthood as a Montessori teacher. And you see children all over the world who are poised, who are balanced, who are independent, who are very normalized, as we would say, living in indigenous communities, never been anywhere near a Montessori indoor environment. So how have they acquired this really high level of normalization without any Montessori material? We also thought about they need opportunities for purposeful work, whether it's care of themselves, care of other people, or care of their environment in the same way that they do this indoors. So if you think about just caring for themselves, the whole process of choosing appropriate clothes, dressing yourself according to the season, sorting out what you need to take with you into the woodland, what is going to happen if you're hungry there, what's going to happen if you need to wash your hands there, all these kind of things. There were many opportunities for practical work to go with them. How do you help other people? How do you take care of each other within the woodland environment? And then obviously, how do you care for the natural environment in the same way as they care for their indoor environment? And this depended very much on the seasons of the year, the kind of work that was available for them to do. And in Scotland, we were very fortunate in that we had very distinct seasons. We had snow in winter, which melted into a beautiful coming of spring. We had summer, albeit not hot, but we had long, light summer days. And then we had glorious autumns with all that abundance that comes with autumn. And so there were so many opportunities presented for work. And then we had to think, what about the sensorial materials, which they won't have with them? And actually, when you go into the woodland, you find you have a complete palette for a range of sensorial refinement. You have all of the tactile experiences, whether it's temperatures, the different qualities of the natural materials. You have smells, you have sounds, you have taste in an appropriate way, sometimes safe, sometimes not safe, and so on. Color goes without saying. And stereognostically, you have everything to serve the stereognostic senses. We also had to be aware that this was the sensitive period for language. And this is where I always came back to something I heard Lynn Lawrence say many, many, many years ago. And I've never forgotten it, and I've always used it. And Lynn said, the most important material for language development is not in a basket on the shelf. It's actually the adult and the other children. So we can tell stories without having any books. We can sing, we can do rhymes, we can do poems, we can play command games, we can play I Spy games. And you can write, you can learn to write in the same fundamental way that the first people learned to write. With the tools that they used, you have sand, you have soil, you have sticks, you have stones. Children, when the time is right and the building blocks are there, they explode into writing without necessarily being in a Montessori indoor environment. And we have to trust that the children's language development will happen. Mathematical mind in the Woodland was actually nothing short of miraculous. What we actually saw. Yes, they can count, and children will count, and they can improvise materials for the operations. I mean, that's very easily done. Geometry is totally embodied by what they see and experience around them. But the real miracle that we saw around mathematics was their development so refined of spatial awareness, their ability to judge distances, weight, balance, pressure, their absolute total awareness of their own body in relation to the environment, which actually then enabled them to develop their own risk assessment. Can I stand on that branch? Is it going to support my weight? And so on and so forth, things like that. We look for the keys to culture. Are they there in the Woodland? If we take the children out, are we not going to deprive them of the wonderful cultural materials in the children's house? Well, no, because they can explore all the sciences through the natural elements. There is soil, there is water, there is stone, there is rock, there is sand, there is air, there is wind, and there is fire if you enable them to make fire. So through the natural elements, there is so much potential science. In terms of botany and zoology, you have all of the very evident life cycles, you have the coming of the seasons, and everything is actually beginning, as it should in Montessori, with the concrete. They're encountering the real, tangible materials first before they transfer that experience to the materials they have inside the children's house. Their awareness of time, seeing how the sun moves across the sky, seeing how the length of the days changes, particularly in a country like Scotland on the hemisphere that is on. Seeing how day and night works, seeing how the seasonal cycles work, the whole flow of the year. And then, of course, that opens up the conversations to what is happening for people in other parts of the world while this is happening for us here. But this happens in a very natural way, and the children come with a range of questions for conversation. Plenty of arts and crafts. We developed a thinking around we should take nothing into the Woodland and we should bring nothing out of the Woodland. So all of the arts, all of the crafts were done with what was there. What could we use that was there to help the children to express themselves? And what we actually saw after the children had been in the Woodland was a very cohesive social group with a real sense of ownership to this place, a real sense of belonging. This was their Woodland. And they lived with a very elevated sense of grace and courtesy. I would say to some extent, it happened much more naturally than it does in the indoor environment. And I can't really explain why that is. It was just an observation that we made. And then we saw the changes coming as they began to be ready for the elementary class. Their relationship with the natural world changes in a very subtle way. And so the elementary children, they would come into the woodland and they would do actually very different things from what the younger children were doing. They really wanted to build on their sense of ownership of this woodland by becoming stewards of this place. They wanted to really take on the responsibility of the care of this woodland because it was precious, because it was delicate, because they were becoming much more mentally and morally aware of the responsibility that humans have for the natural world, whether it's the trees, whether it's the quality of the water, whether it's the various forms of life that they find there, both plant and animal. There was now a real sense of environmental stewardship. And so we saw them doing much more purposeful, practical work in actually caring for the woodland. We also saw that there were many, many opportunities which enabled them to practically apply and experience the lessons that were arising out of the cosmic tales. The whole range of cosmic tales that they were being told in the elementary class, all of those key lessons and experiences which emerged from those, these children were actually able to apply and to practice and to experiment with in a very natural way. And then they would seek out, depending on what they found in the woodland at that particular time of the year, they would seek out the materials for the classifications and for the charts that they've been introduced to indoors. And I actually really believe that what happened with these children was, because they were doing this real practical experience outside, they embodied an understanding about the biology, about the botany and the zoology, all the aspects of biology, about the physical geography, all of this. They kind of embodied it in a way that they don't get when they learn it from charts and timelines, although we know they are brilliant. They're not enough on their own. Well, they are, but we have cosmic education. When Mario created all of this wonderful understandings for the children, it came about outside in nature. He was out in nature with the children. They made their discoveries, and then to help them to take their discoveries into the abstract, he created the geography charts, he created the botany charts, he created these wonderful materials, but it started with the findings in nature. And then, of course, we saw this sensitive period for imagination. And this really took off in the open environment of the woodland. They were able to create their own little dramas. They were able to enact stories that they had heard, they had read. They were able to play, if you like, at living history and geography. I remember one book in particular, The Boy with the Bronze Axe, which was a very popular story set in the Bronze Age. And after the children had read this book, they spent a long period, several weeks, building a Bronze Age settlement with sleeping shelves and food storage areas. And it was really, really fascinating to see what they did. They did a similar thing with a medieval marketplace. And all of this came from the children's interests and their passions, really, from what they were reading and from what they were learning in history. And so then we got to 2011, and I had by that time completed 3 years of children's house and 6 years of elementary. So we had seen this piece of outdoor work evolve over 9 years. And of course, what happens then is it becomes time to move on to the adolescent community Centre for Study and Work. And so the children had to move on. But my memory that I took with me, I mean, I then moved to Sweden, where actually, ironically, although I went to Sweden for the adolescent work, was actually given the opportunity to work with a group of Swedish children, Jenny Höglund's Children's House, also in the outdoors, where they also have a forest adjoining their school. And of course, we saw, as you would expect, exactly the same response from the Swedish children as we had seen from the Scottish children. So those children who I worked with are now actually all young adults. They're no longer children, they're all out there in the world. And I'm still in contact with many of them. I know many of them, partly because my own children were part of the group, and so they are friends of my own children and so on. And they have this really deep shared childhood memory. When you speak with them, they remember the things that I actually first mentioned, I remembered from my childhood. They have the memory of a sense of freedom, a sense of people trusted them to go and do what they chose to do, what they needed to do, access what they needed to access, a sense of independence that came from that, and confidence that came from that. They are aware now as adults, when they look back, that there was a respect for each other, which I think arose from the respect that they were shown. And of course, a very deep connection with the natural world, which of course is crucial, because these are now the young adults who are out there in the world. They've gone through a variety of higher studies and all moved into different areas of work, but they all carry with them this love of the outdoors, this sense of responsibility towards the environment. And I feel that no matter what they've gone on to choose to do, when I look back and remember them as children, I actually really believe that their fundamental development of personality, which after all is what Montessori is all about. It's all about this development of personality. I really feel that as much as they got from their very beautiful children's house, very inspired elementary class, they equally got from the outdoor environment. And I think what's so magical about that is that this is something that anybody can actually do. You know, you don't necessarily have to have every piece of Montessori material to be able to offer all the components of a children's house or all the aspects of cosmic education. You can actually do this with a minimum of materials if you take the knowledge and understanding from Montessori's texts and apply them. And that works beautifully in an outdoor environment. Now, it could be a forest, it could be a beautiful woodland, it could just be a piece of land near to where you are. It could be a huge garden. I mean, remember, we're talking about small children here. So if there is a large, large garden, that to the children can be enough. But it's what they do in it that matters. And this is where the difference comes between having a garden and having a woodland. How can you use what perhaps is a garden in the same way that you would use a woodland? And yes, of course, they can cultivate and they can plant and they can do those kind of practical activities. But there's something more that's fundamental about just being in the woodland. And so how can you bring that closer to what you have at your site? And so what I would like to do is to show you some pictures of some of these children and to just see what's happening. Explain perhaps to you what's happening to some of these children. Thank you, Sveta. All right, so here we see a boy who is 6 years old. You see another boy in the distance, actually seemingly doing nothing. But isn't this the beauty of Montessori education? Who knows what is going on in that boy's head? I can actually tell you that that young 6-year-old is now actually running a Montessori adolescent community, which is what he ended up doing. But who knows what he was reflecting upon, and how important is it for us to create for children the opportunity for solitude. And I have to say, it's much easier outdoors than it is indoors. Okay, thank you, Sveta. Can we see the next picture? Not always alone. These are two little children, children's house age, in conversation. They were actually curled up in what was, to them, a nest. They were imagining that they were in a nest. And you know that wonderful sense of cocooning and how that feels. Yeah, they were nesting together. So sometimes you are with a friend, or as we see in the next picture, sometimes you can cram in as many people as possible. And here you see children of mixed ages, all children's house, but from the 3-year-old through to the 6-year-old, all playing, conversing, and being together. All right, so in the next picture, we actually see this is how you care for others in the natural environment. Here we see a child who is about 7 years old, the child in the blue, and she is actually showing the younger child how to get down from the tree. She's presenting to her a safe way of how to do this. And this is where, of course, we need to step back as adults and allow the older children to present to the younger children. Yeah. So in the next picture, this is where we see the music and the singing and the dancing and the drama. These children are actually playing violins with sticks. They've created violins and they are singing. This is their music making. Actually, there is one, the child in the pink is actually a Czech child who was in Scotland at that time. All right, and so the next picture shows us some of the kind of artwork, and the artwork is vast. There is so much possibility, but this was obviously a form of land art that the youngest of children are able to do. the weaving and the modeling with mud and clay and all of that is there in the woodland. And it's amazing what, in fact, the older children are able to do. So in the next picture, we see a child here grinding stone, but she's doing that with, it's a very special red stone. She's doing it with the purpose of making paint. She will actually combine that powder with the water in the stream to make paint in order to do paintings. So they have to sort of make their own materials in order to do the art, which of course is what the first people did. All right, and in the next picture, we see the same child, but this time she's working at building a fire. And I think that this is something we have to really trust the children, just like we trust them with knives and sharp instruments. We have to trust them with things like fire. We show them how to do this carefully, sensibly, safely, and we trust that they will do it. And it's very, very satisfying when they know how to build a fire, and equally how to leave the fire when they go away, so it is safely out. In the next picture, we see here elementary children, and they have pieces of bamboo, and they are trying to construct an irrigation system. They've been studying in their history charts about irrigation, and they are trying to devise a system which will divert the water and make it go in a different direction. The next picture. I just wanted you to see this as to give you the idea that when you have a variety of components to your natural environment, you actually have all of the material for cosmic education. You have everything there. And when I was fortunate some time ago to visit Kodaikanal, where Montessori obviously worked and where cosmic education was born. And when I visited the areas in Kodaikanal, I could see the geography charts. I could see the botany charts. I could see all of these potential pieces that we now use in our elementary classrooms for real. They were there. The work done by wind, the work done by water. So we have to look in our natural environments and see where is the cosmic education all around us. And then there is the practical work. So in the next picture, we see here two boys who are actually doing some repair work. They needed to, there was part of the pathway into the woodland which was not safe. It needed to be felted for the very icy weather. And so they were actually felting the path. This is real, purposeful, practical work that needed to be done. And in the next picture, you will see before they could do that, they had to prepare the felt that they were going to use. Now, I don't need to explain to you the amount of mathematics that's going on here, but this was all in preparation for making the woodland a safer place to enter in icy weather. Okay, so we move on and we see how woodwork is fantastic for young children to do. It kind of emerges from the forest or from the woodland. So gathering logs is a huge piece. Gathering logs for a whole variety of reasons. Sometimes they work alone, like this little boy is doing, Or in the next picture, we see you can't always manage alone. Sometimes you have to work together and collaborate with your friends in order to move a big object. Of course, what we're seeing is maximum effort. Of course, Montessori said only through maximum effort do children truly become engaged. And the work they have to do, moving logs, moving big stones, and so on and so forth, brings maximum effort. They need help here because of the weight, because of the balance of the log. In the next picture, we actually see what's happening here is that a child has decided to bring back to the school building an idea that he'd had from the woodland. So he's brought back some bark from a tree, and he wants to create something to make his school building beautiful. And so he is at the top of a ladder, and he is drilling holes in the bark that he has brought. In the next picture, you can see what he did. You can see he's attached the bark and then has been able to put up plants which will grow on his school building. This was his idea, but actually, thinking about it, this is an idea now that city planners everywhere are trying to introduce. How do we bring nature into the cities? And these children just know how to do that. And of course, we have to trust them, no fear of tools and what they need to use. In the next picture, you'll see he's actually working on his same project here. This is all part of what he was wanting to do to embellish the school building. And you can see the focus and the concentration in his face. Nothing is going to divert him from this work. And this is work that actually started in the woodland. So if we move on with the next pictures, children soaring. That's actually out in the woodland. They are using a saw. They're bringing wood, which will come back for making fires back at the school building. And then we move on again. Attention to detail is a great one. There's so much microscopic, minute detail that the children look into. I think the next picture will show us the same. This child is really focused on the minute detail. We move on and we see this is the seasons. This is the joy of being in spring when the flowers are beginning to come, or the start of early summer, and that wonderful sensorial experience of this is now springtime, the smells of the flowers, the different textures. And in the next picture, we see not spring, but autumn. And this child is exploring, what does it feel like to be a hibernating animal? We see all the squirrels gathering their nuts. Everyone's preparing for winter. We have a deep carpet of beautiful leaves. What does it feel like to be under there? To me, this is sensorial experience to the utmost, but at the same time, it's also learning about hibernation. And in the next picture, of course, in autumn, there is the gathering of, well, nuts, and well, in summer they've gathered berries, but now it's apple time, and cooking is a big thing in the woodland. You can cook many things in the woodland. So here they are baking their apples. The next picture. Actually, I can't even see the children here, but you can see, just imagine when you have snow, the potential for science is phenomenal, and the potential for sensory exploration is, and of course, practical work, because the snow and the ice bring with them so much work for the children to do. So the next one. These are my lasting memories. These are really important pictures for me. This picture is a very young child, very new in Children's House, hasn't got to the point yet of taking her gloves off. She's not yet ready to do that. But the challenges that we can give to the very smallest of children and how they develop their sense of perseverance. This child, we actually have a video clip of this very same child who was very, very small. And the video clip shows her trying to climb up a bank and the perseverance that she had to develop in order to be able to do it. I think that's one of the greatest things we give them. In the next picture, it's another one which strikes me as, this is a great gift we give them. This is a child of about 7. And she is really, she's got herself in a position where she has to make a decision now. Do I jump? Do I find another way? But whatever the decision she comes to is, she's developing self-confidence in her own ability to be able to make decisions, to weigh things up, to understand the decision-making process and be confident that she can make decisions. And I think that actually is crucial to everything else that they go on to do in their lives. Can I make decisions and can I be confident in my own decision making? And in the next picture, we see, you know, there's that lesson around you can't always do it by yourself. Sometimes you need to ask for the help and collaboration of a second child, and to be able to ask for help and for the other child to be there ready and willing to offer that help. I think these are skills the children need in their lives. Just like now in community conversations, we can't exist alone. And this is something we want the children to embody from a very early age. And they get that when they need each other. And I think they need each other in the outdoor environment in a way that they don't quite need each other in the indoor environment in the same degree. And the next picture is just the sheer fun of enjoying each other's company. You know, it is okay to play. It is okay to pretend you're riding a horse when you're sitting on a log. And we have to allow children to do that. This is not fantasy. This is just play in a holistic and wholesome way. And the next one. Okay, oh, you can't see the children there inside, but this is about building shelters. And they build shelters of all kinds. And of course, the fundamental needs of humans, all of that can be explored so beautifully in the Woodland. You can see they've put a roof made out of ferns across their shelter, and they have a row of coat hooks inside. You can see the coats hanging up inside. Shelter building is very fundamental to human development, and children do it. So just a quick look at my lasting memories, probably. The next picture. The joyful child is one that we want to see in Montessori. The joy in the children's eyes as they are working. The next one. The child who's willing to take risks. Children have to be able to learn how to take risks. And the next one. The satisfaction and the sense of achievement when your small group has come through something together. This is a group of young elementary children, probably about 8-year-olds, probably 6 to 9, certainly. they've just walked through a waterfall basically, but they've been doing a lot of work. And this is the end of the day. And there's that sense of, we did it. We managed it. We did what we set out to do today. And don't we feel satisfied with ourselves? We look a bit wet. We look a bit bedraggled, but we feel good. Yeah. And to get to that place of being so confident in their learning together and being together, it starts in the next photograph. It starts here, where you have 2 3-year-olds. I don't know what they're holding between them. I think they're holding a hat, actually, the other child's hat. They are just about to go off into the forest, the woodland. Confidently, happily, not an adult in sight, not too far away, but as far as they're concerned, they're on their own. It's them and the outdoor environment. And it's starting at that age that everything else is able to be consolidated. And that's when we see, I look at these children now and I think, what will they be like as adolescents? What will they be like when they enter the adolescent community, and the gifts that they will bring and the strengths that they will bring? So that's all the pictures I was going to share. I would love to hear what other people are doing, if people are going out into nature with their children, because I think now at this time, it's maybe all we can do. Don't worry about it if you can't take all your Montessori material with you. Can you take the Montessori core principles with you into nature?
Oh, Lesley, and this sentence you just said, that needs to be engraved in stone. Okay, don't worry. If you can't take your Montessori materials, take out the Montessori principles. So that I think we can stop recording and streaming.